Let's go.
Let's go. Oh, no.
Do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Don't say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have rage issues!
I have nothing to prove to you. When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where we are celebrating our 250th episode. Yay! I'm Karen Peterson, joined by Lauren Humphries Brooks.
Yay!
Hi, Lauren. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. Yes, I'm excited. I'm excited about this topic, and I'm also excited about the fact that it's 250 episodes. That's amazing.
Yeah, can you believe it?
Cool.
That's a lot of talking about movies and
about
feminism.
movies. Yeah.
I survived the hurricane.
Yay!
I'm still here.
My mom was worried about you, by the way, just to let you know. Like she was like, "Is Karen okay?" I was like, "Yeah, she's fine."
That's so nice. Yeah, no, I was totally fine. We did get rain. It got a little bit windy, but definitely not like the hurricane or tropical storm force winds here. But the town I work in, because I work for a small community college, and that town got hit pretty hard. Not like in the main part of town, but up on the outskirts, up toward the mountains. And we had some people stuck in their homes. We had, there's like some of the mountain roads are just destroyed. There are people that like can't take the main drives right now, and who knows when that will reopen still, you know. And there's one town that's entirely just gone. Someone was telling me that in those cases FEMA just like cuts you a check and walks away, so it's pretty sad. But for the most part, it actually ended up not being so bad, so we got really lucky. So yeah, how's your week been?
It's been pretty good. Basically doing a lot of work and watching John Woo films, which has been a wonderful respite, I guess, in a certain sense.
Yeah.
From like reality. Like, yeah. So
there is very much an escapist element to John Woo movies. That is true. And we're going to talk about that today. But first, I just wanted to share, we got a comment from Sharon who said 250 triple exclamation point. How wonderful. I bet there have been many, many changes. Oh man, there have been so many changes to this show.
Yeah. Since
the beginning. First of all, there used to be 4 of us. We cut that in half. Kristen and Kim, by all accounts, are doing well. I'm supposed to see Kristen on Sunday. I don't know if I'm going to, because I just had a COVID exposure again. So
oh no,
I think I should probably not. I am fine, but just in case, you know, trying to not be the one to spread stuff. So we'll see. But yeah, they're both doing well. Lots of other things, like we've kind of changed how we talk about movies. We've changed our format. You know, what are some other things we've changed over the years?
We talk a lot more, I think, about less contemporary films. Like we've definitely, and it depends upon what we're talking about, but we've definitely moved back to a lot of film history discussions. And like when we first started, a lot of it was much more contemporary. Also, we have to, you know, note the fact that we started, and within like the second episode, Harvey Weinstein had the whole scandal had broken. The Me Too movement really started up, like all of that shit that was going on in Hollywood and elsewhere. So we kind of totally on accident, right? We were sort of at the beginning of all this. And so much of, if you listen to some of those early episodes, so much of the focus really is on like, you know, actors who are getting exposed as abusers and like all of that stuff. I'm glad in a certain sense that we've been able to move away from that to a certain degree, but it was an interesting time, really, to start talking like this.
We had, I don't know if you remember this, we had recorded an episode that ended up not working, so it kind of became just a test episode, and that one was actually about Stephen King. And
Yeah, it was when It had just come out.
yeah, and so we were talking about Stephen King. We were actually talking a lot about the way he writes about women and how it's not always great. And that episode was kind of a lost episode because we weren't able to put it out. There was a lot of audio errors with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then our official first episode, we ended up just kind of doing something different. And yeah, episode 2, I think, or maybe it was even that first one, was when the stuff started happening with who was the first person that went down? Was it the Birth Movies Death guy?
Yeah, I think that was the first one that we
around that.
talked about was Devin Faraci.
Yeah.
And hey everybody, remember Devin Faraci? Then no one gives a shit about him anymore. Isn't that awesome?
He became a Buddhist and
like fun he did.
that guy.
Yeah, so that was
him.
I think that was the start, and then it
was like Harry Knowles, and then it was Cine Family, and then boom.
And then Weinstein, and that's when everything sort of busted wide open. It was an interesting trajectory.
It really was. And we used to have a weekly segment, This Week in Garbage People, because there was so much happening at that time and so much coming out that we just would do a rundown of everyone who had been accused that week. So I'm really glad we're past that. Yeah, like there's still garbage people and we will still talk about them, but we don't have to make it a weekly segment.
And Harvey Weinstein is in prison.
The rapist, Harvey Weinstein, is in prison, probably for the rest of his life.
And that's funny. And it continues to be funny, and it will always be funny.
And it feels really good to know that he is behind bars and cannot hurt anyone anymore.
Yes. So yeah, things have definitely changed, but yeah, I'm having fun. So
it's just such a good time to talk about movies, like current movies, old movies, all of it. Like it's great. And I really enjoy talking about movies with you, Lauren.
Me too. I enjoy talking about movies with you, Karen.
Oh, thanks. So before we talk about movies this week, we're going to talk a little bit about TV, specifically Our Flag Means Death, which is coming back in October. Finally. So happy.
I'm so excited.
Vanity Fair released an exclusive first look at Our Flag Means Death season 2. And they released a bunch of first look photos that are just magical and perfect. And
they're just burrowing into my soul. The photo of Steed standing there with the bottle, and I'm like, oh my God, how is he gonna react? Because he doesn't know yet. He doesn't know what's happened yet.
He's oh my gosh. I just I just can't. So Minnie Driver's joining the show, which is gonna be fun. She's delightful. Yeah, there's just so much happening, and I can't wait. And we're gonna link the article because if you haven't gotten a chance to look at them, you need to see these photos and just enjoy the magic. For anybody who doesn't know what Our Flag Means Death is, it's a show on Max, and that's all you need to know, and you should just go watch it immediately.
It's an amazing show, and it's not very long either. But it's like 10 episodes.
It's 10 episodes. They're like, it's a comedy. It's like a half-hour comedy show. So I think each episode is somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes. And it's a not fantasy, that's not the right word, but like a not entirely accurate telling of the story of Stede Bonnet, who was the gentleman pirate. He was a real person who befriended Blackbeard, and hijinks ensued. And it stars Rhys Darby and Taika Waititi, and that's all you need to know. Go watch it.
And everything is wonderful. Yes, I did see that someone had mentioned that I think it was The Independent had reviewed Good Omens 2 and was saying, oh, this is a buddy comedy. and people were making jokes about the fact that, oh yeah, this is really a buddy comedy. And they had done, and apparently someone had done the same thing with Our Flag Means Death, just like, oh, it's a buddy comedy about these, and just like, oh yeah, guys being pals, like dudes being bros. That's what this is about, 100%.
Sure, Jan.
So, I mean, I know that's how I relate to all of my same gender buddies, like all the time. My pals, my friends.
Oh, yep, that's definitely what it is. That's definitely it. Oh man. Anyway, Our Flag Means Death season 2 is coming in October, and it's gonna be magical and I can't wait. So yeah. All right. So this week we want to talk John Woo. It's something that it's a topic we've been considering for a while now, and it's the end of summer. It's the end of summer movie season. It just felt like a good time to talk John Woo. So specifically, we do have a couple of movies that we're going to dive into. But here's a little bit of a background about John Woo. He was born John Woo Yusen in 1946 in Hong Kong, and he is best known for action movies. I think we can just sum it up that way.
That's one way of putting it, I think. I don't think he's ever made light romantic comedies or anything.
No, but he did make Wind Talkers, which was like a war drama. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah, he's best known for I'm sorry. I said he was born in Hong Kong. He was not. He was born in China. But his family was from Hong Kong. He grew up there. Anyway, so but yeah, he started making movies in the 70s and continues to make movies. He just recently had something, I can't remember what, but anyway, some of his biggest, best known movies are films like Hard Target with Jean-Claude Van Damme, A Face Off with John Travolta, which we're going to talk about, John Travolta and Nicolas Cage. He did Mission Impossible 2, just lots of big action-packed, like over the top action movies is what he's really well known for, and doves. So
but bombastic. I was thinking of like what adjectives. Bombastic. Bombastic action movies, I think, are very, and I say that with love too. Like I'm not saying like, oh, this is a bad thing. It's just like, no, but these are bombastic films.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, he also in a lot of, not a lot, but in a number of his films, he also appears, as either a character or a background actor. So he kind of does a little bit of the Hitchcock thing, but not in every movie. So I like in one of his movies, he played a character named Mr. Wu. I was like, oh, so he's playing himself.
Yes.
Anyway, so Lauren, what is the first John Woo movie you saw?
I think it was probably Face Off. Mom, Dad, I don't know, like, why did you show me that when I was like, I'm not going to say that it was right when it came out necessarily, because I think that but it would have been when it came out on like video, right? I'm pretty positive I didn't see it in the theater, but I'm just like, what? Why did that happen? Because I remember some scenes vividly, like very, very well. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But I think that was probably the first John Woo movie that I saw. And then the first one when I was really aware of like who John Woo actually was Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah. Let's see. So what are some of the things that make John Woo stand out as a filmmaker? Some of the things that he's best known for. Like we joke a lot about the doves.
Well, yeah, and I was trying to figure out, where did the doves start, right? Like at what point, because I recently saw one of his much earlier films from the 70s, I think it was, Last Hurrah for Chivalry.
Yeah, which is available on Criterion.
is available at Criterion. It's one of those films that, like, for the first hour I'm like, when is something going to happen? And then the last half hour of the film is basically a fight scene.
It doesn't stop happening.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic fight scene. Like, it's great martial arts. It's just like continuous, right? So it's a bit of a mixed bag, that film, but I do not recall any doves being featured. So there's definitely some point where he like became this kind of campy almost. Like there's definitely a self-awareness to a lot of his films, that the explosions and the slow motion and the excessive violence and excessive like long gun battles, etc. I mean, all of the films that we're talking about have really long action sequences, particularly nearing the end of the film, where it just keeps on going and more stuff keeps on happening. And it's extreme, but it's not extreme in like the way that Tarantino is extreme, I guess. Right. It's hard to catalyze, I guess.
Yeah. So John Woo has said, and this is a quote in Screen Rant, but this is something that he said is, these guys have done some bad things in their lives, but their souls got saved in the end, which is why I wanted to express through this image. So he uses the doves to express sort of this, because doves are known for they representing peace and purity. And so he uses those to symbolize, like, for his characters that either have gone through a change and become more pure, or the characters who are like the good guy, like this is the person who's on the right side, basically. So but it started with the movie The Killer.
Okay.
And that film was from 1989. So that was the first time that he used that, and then he didn't use it in every movie after that, but it is something that pops up frequently. He's also used butterflies for the same, basically the same reason. So yeah, he's definitely. Go ahead.
Go on, sorry. I was good. There's an inherent contrast, obviously, where you've got these big explosions and gunplay and people killing each other and blood everywhere and all of that, and then you've got these, like these symbols of purity, these very peaceful symbols, that are kind of there in the middle of all of it. But it does produce this extreme effect, I guess. So you've got, the doves flying away while explosions are going off, and characters are shooting each other, and it kind of happens in the middle of all of that. Like, so symbolically, I think it's hard to make some of those arguments, given that, I mean, the kind of one of the major points of climax in Face Off involves being in a church with the doves and the cross and and like a standoff where everybody is pointing guns at everybody else. And so it's like, so how is this saving anyone? It's more like that element of contrast, and that sort of that the campiness, the campy elements to pretty much all of his work, that there's an extremity there that is also self-aware.
Yeah, and there's also, even while he's making these campy, violent, action-packed movies, there's also this sense of like, he knows what story he's telling, but he has this like deeper thought to it too. Like everything he does, even when it's, well, especially when it's like really campy, it's like everything he does is very intentional and very thought out. He doesn't just throw together a bunch of stuff and just make it work. Like he has a very strong point of view and a very strong just thought, and he brings that out in his films. So it's very archetypical. I mean, a lot of, in fact, all three of the films that we're talking about, it's very much, good versus evil, but also the complications of those things. So, and in some ways, reaching back to something like Last Hurrah for Chivalry, where you've got this almost legendary story going on. And he takes those kinds of ideas and he transposes them to, the modern day, so the 1980s, the 90s, the aughts, right? And tells these stories that you are always aware of who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, but you're also aware of the complications of that and how those archetypes get
complicated. The good cop versus the bad cop, the hero, you know, the police officer versus the gangster, but also how they switch roles or become more and more like each other, and also how they pull away from each other. So you've got that kind of consistent face-off, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of specific movies. First of all, one of his earlier Hong Kong films that is probably best known for a lot of American audiences is Hard Boiled, which stars Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung. And
little baby Chow Yun-fat,
my
little
gosh.
baby Tony Leung. I saw them. I was like, oh my God, you're both so cute.
They're both
Look at
so young and adorable. And oh my gosh, Tony in particular is like so hot in this movie.
He really is.
Yeah. So it's basically starts off with sort of this like well, it starts out there's basically a shootout every 10 minutes for the first hour and a half, and then there's just 40 straight minutes of a shootout. It's great. It's really fun. But it starts off like what gets the plot in motion is a shootout between gangs and police officers killed in the process. And this sends Chow Yun-fat, because it's his partner, kind of on this like out for revenge. He's going to bring down this gang, and he ends up partnering with an undercover cop who is Tony Leung, and they're basically trying to bring down this like big gang leader and the whole network. So that's kind of in a nutshell what happens. There's a lot that happens, but overall, Lauren, this is your first time watching Hard Boiled 2, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we both watched it for the first time this week. So what were your overall impressions, thoughts, and feelings about Hard Boiled?
I mean, once I got there's a certain point that I got past, and you mentioned it in our Slack conversations, this issue of police brutality and the kind of the glorification of the cops. Yeah. as these heroes, right? And I do think the film complicates it a little bit, particularly as you get this conflict between the undercover officer, who is sort of, you know, having to balance the things that all undercover officers in films have to do, which is he's got to be the bad guy, right? But he also is not actually a psychopathic killer. Mm-hmm. And so you've got this kind of back and forth that goes on. And then you've also got the Chow Yun-fat character, who is a cop, right? Who is not an undercover cop at all. But is also definitely doing things outside of his jurisdiction, outside of what you're allowed to do as a police officer, like all of that. And it's very much in that like Dirty Harry vibe, which was actually one of the influences I understand for this film. Yeah. But I do think it's one of those times where if you have to turn off a little bit of your brain in understanding, you know, propaganda and issues of police brutality and all of that, and kind of just enjoy what Wu constructs. Because the action set pieces are fantastic. The last 40 minutes are really spectacular. Like I got to the point where they were going into the hospital, and I was like, well, there's like another 45 minutes left of this film, like, but this is definitely the big climax. So is this going to go on for 45 minutes? And it does. That's exactly what happens. It just keeps going. Yeah. My thing at that point was like, why is he holding a baby on the poster? I don't understand. Yes. Oh. Well, and it just, that's the thing, it just keeps on escalating, and it makes sense to a certain degree, like just like, okay, yes, okay, the hospital, and then like, oh, we've got to evacuate the hospital, and then it's getting worse and worse and worse, and it's like they're gonna rescue the babies, like we're gonna carry, and then he carries a baby around for like 20 minutes. It's like the one baby that they didn't get out, and there's no way to just go out the window now, and so he's like carrying a baby through the hospital, shooting bad guys. And I like his dialogue with the baby. Like he's just like, "Oh, you can't! Don't you look at this? This is X-rated violence. Like we're not okay." Yeah, this movie is wild. It is. One of the things in regards to police brutality that I had brought up that I really do want to just
just look into a little bit more for myself. One of the things I was really struck by as the movie is opening, like in the early, not just the first scene, but in early conversations, like when Tequila, which is Chow Yun Fat's character, when he's talking to his boss, and just the way that he interacts with his fellow officers and stuff, it was one of these things, because it's like here in the States, I'm used to this attitude of like, oh, that guy's a cop, like we just accept that cops are assholes. And no, I understand not all cops are assholes. But like we just kind of accept that if someone is a cop, that it's like allowed for them to just be a jerk, and it's like watching this movie, which is very much not set in the United States. It was like, wait, they kind of have that too. And I was thinking through like, man, I've had interactions with police in other countries, like in Europe and stuff, not really negative ones, but like it's so common for police to just be jerks, and we all universally just accept this. And that's what I was like, I don't get it. But you brought up, yeah, it has a lot to do with like Dirty Harry and those types of characters.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of, particularly in the 1980s, and I think that Woo's definitely in dialogue with other films that are being released in that period. So it's set in Hong Kong, right? But he's definitely, like, I mean, he's using stuff like Dirty Harry, which I think is late 70s. Bullet is another one that I guess was a major inspiration for this. But it's that kind of Law and Order, the cop who has to go outside the rules in order to get things done.
Right.
And it is a very reactionary stance, right? Cops are not supposed to do that. But it's this reaction to this whole concept of corruption and concept of the only savior is really the lone cop who doesn't always obey the rules, and in fact usually breaks the rules, but succeeds, and he gets the bad guys
in the name of justice.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of the basis of a lot of propaganda, that the cop, as long as his heart is in the right place, as long as he's doing what he's doing for law and order and justice, can do pretty much anything that he wants to.
And as long as he's going to save that baby, it's all good.
Exactly. And I think something like this film, because to a certain degree, because it makes it so extreme, is less offensive in some ways than some of the more serious films. Because it's silly when you've got like Chow Yun Fat carrying around a baby in one hand, shooting people with the other, and rappelling out windows and all of that stuff. It's very like, this is silly. Like it is. It's so obviously action movie land, right? Whereas with some, and that's true kind of with something like Dirty Harry, but there are other films that that take the same perspective but are more realistic ultimately, and those are the ones that I think get more disturbing. But at the same time, it's this sense that like, okay, we're going to accept that the good guy, right, the hero, is this asshole cop who will do anything, including breaking all kinds of laws, all kinds of conventions, to get the villains. And because the villains are so bad, right, in this film, you've got a guy who's like, I'm going to destroy a hospital, and
he straight up shoots patients.
Yeah, exactly. Like you've got like, even to the point that some of his own henchmen are like, hey, bro, this is a little much. And so he shoots them. But yeah, so because the villain is so villainous, right, I think as an audience, we're totally conditioned to accept the behavior of the police. We're just like, oh yeah, sure, of course, kill everybody because these guys are the worst.
Yeah. So overall, what would you say is your biggest takeaway from Hard Boiled?
It is fantastically entertaining. Like it is. I've recommended this actually to a couple of people since I saw it. Because I'm like, if you can turn off that part of your brain that wants to critique it, right? It's really, really enjoyable. And then, step back and turn that part of your brain on again and be like, that's really problematic. So, striking that kind of balance. But I do think just in terms of the action, what he accomplishes, and makes us care about these characters. Like, I think that having that balance with Tony Leung's character, who is much more troubled by the things that he has to do, and is much more like, I don't this is not why I became a police officer, right? I became a police officer to get the bad guys, not to have this really complicated moral issues.
Mhm.
And I think that having that balance to Chow Yun-fat's character is very much needed, because otherwise it would be too bombastic. It would be too much like this one hero against the world kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're both great. It's loads of fun. The final like sequence, be prepared for a lot of violence, but it's like very entertaining violence.
Yeah. I really was taken with just, I mean, I've also seen a couple of his other films that were a little bit earlier than this too, and he's very good at bringing together like good fight choreography. Obviously he's not the choreographer, but like he's really good at bringing that out and using that, incorporating that with story, with humor, with, you know, just every element comes together really well. And even though it is big and loud and crazy and chaotic, it somehow all comes together in a way that's really good. And one thing that I was really surprised about was how I didn't get lost in the subtitles while watching the action. There's so much being said, but it was like I could follow, you know, 98% of it, you know, and it was that's pretty rare to be able to pull that many elements together and make it work. And also just to touch on what you were saying too about like Tony Leung's character, where like even though this is a crazy loud action movie, there's still this depth to him that also comes through and doesn't feel silly, and that's also a really hard balance to pull off as well. So yeah, even though it's crazy, it actually really shows John Woo's capabilities as a director overall very, very well.
It really does. And the fact that, you know, you get to the babies, right? But by the time you get to the babies, you've been prepared for it. It works. It fits in with the entire structure of the film. It doesn't feel like this sudden, you know, shift or left turn or anything. It's very much like, yes, of course this is going to happen. Yes, I'm very invested in him rescuing the baby. Like it's that experience that it's very well done. I did want to say really quickly, I guess that the female character was originally written for Michelle Yeoh.
Oh.
And she wound up not being able to do the film, so they recast and they actually rewrote the character in large part. But
is that why they keep saying yes, madame?
I think so. Like I noticed that line and I was like, and then I
say
looked
it to her like 3 times.
I was like, oh, so this was supposed to be for Michelle Yeoh. All right. And I do, you know, I it's one of those things like, man, that would have been interesting to have those 3 actors just period in that film playing those parts. And I imagine that the I think it's Teresa, that role would have been quite different if they had cast Michelle Yeoh. But I was like, oh, that's an interesting what if, you know.
Yeah okay, so after he did Hard Boiled, his next film was actually his first American film. That was Hard Target in 1993 with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and this was actually the first John Woo film that I saw. I loved Hard Target, so good. And then he does Broken Arrow, and then 1997 Face Off, and we got a comment from Shakita about this, so I just wanted to share. She says, I just want to say I used to watch Face Off all the time when I was younger. The movie came out when I was 13 and I saw it in the theaters, and when it used to air on cable, Stars mostly, I used to watch it every day. I can recite the entire movie still to this day. I used to annoy the hell out of my mom. I can relate to that. She used to throw shoes at me, LOL. It used to come on the Stars East and Stars West channels, sometimes overlapping, and I would switch the TV back and forth watching different parts of the movie. I thought it was so cool with the pretty guns and the doves. I watched it recently and it's a pretty dumb movie and the science is unbelievable. Definitely doesn't hold up. Oh, thank you, Shakita. I love it.
But does it hold up perfectly, actually?
Yes, it is exactly the movie he wanted to make. And yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know what Face Off is,
First of all, how can you not? Like, come on, this is a classic.
Just pause right now, go watch it, and then come back. It stars Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. John Travolta plays an FBI agent, and Nicolas Cage plays a really bad guy. And they end up switching faces. Well, John Travolta switches and takes on Nicolas Cage's face to go undercover and try to find out where the location is of a bomb that is set to go off somewhere in Los Angeles. And when Nicolas Cage wakes up without his face, he wants his face, but it's not available. So he just takes the one that is available. I don't know how else to describe this movie for someone who doesn't.
It's basically, I was trying to describe this to a friend who'd never seen it, and I was like, well, it's John Travolta and Nicolas Cage, and they switch faces.
Yeah.
And they're mortal enemies.
Yes.
So they become each other.
Yeah. Because Nicolas Cage's character is Castor Troy, and John Travolta plays Sean Archer. And Castor had been trying to kill Sean years before and accidentally killed his son instead. And so they are sworn enemies to the death. And this movie also stars Joan Allen, Gina Gershon, Alessandro Nivola, a few other people. It's so like Chiquita, I have seen this movie many, many times, and I could quote a lot of it, but I hadn't watched it in a few years. So I just recently rewatched it. Actually, this was the movie I was watching when I was like, we need to do an episode about John Woo. And you just watched it again for the first time in a while, just this week, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
So why don't you share some of your present day thoughts about Face Off?
I sent you multiple messages as I was rewatching this film, and I knew what the plot was. I did remember the plot. I was just like, oh yeah, John Travolta and Nicolas Cage swap faces. And I mean, first of all, yes, that is not how science works. That's not how faces work. That's not.
But at no point in making this movie did they ever pretend to believe that this could really happen. So I just want to make sure that this is known. This is not something they thought would really work.
And I do really like the fact that there are several points at which, particularly the John Travolta character, who has to I give Travolta credit, because actually I give all of them credit, because he has to listen to this shit and like respond reasonably to it, right? And so when he's being told like, here's what we're gonna do, he does have this like, what? Like, no. First of all, I don't know how that's possible. Second of all, no. and then he finally gets convinced, and I do think that it's believable, particularly the way that character is developed. It's believable that he would go this far, right?
Yeah.
To change his face with his mortal enemy so that he can get into this maximum security prison and get to the brother and like find out where this bomb is. So
and that he's really the only person that could do this because he knows him so well.
Yes, exactly. So it makes sense. It makes character sense, right? Mm-hmm. That's not how faces work.
No.
That's not how skin works. The one time that I think Castor Troy is really, really relatable in this film is when he wakes up and is like, what the hell has happened? He's so mad. And it's like, you know what? Fair. You were in a coma and the cops just like took your face off and put it on another guy. Like,
and didn't give you a new face, just left you faceless.
Just left it there. And the whole idea is like, oh, he's basically a vegetable. He's never going to wake up, all that. But still, it's like, that's not legal. That's not okay. Like, I totally get why he would be really, really angry and like want to kill a lot of people as a result of that. So, fair.
Okay, but he was already a bad guy who killed a lot of people before he had a good reason to.
But he does have a good reason to be angry. That's all that I'm saying. It's just like, I understand that anger.
But there's like as batshit as this movie is, as ridiculous, and honestly, to use Shakita's word, it is a dumb plot. But there's something so subtly brilliant about it, and actually some very like there's very little about this movie that's subtle. But there's certain things about it that are like, man, they really did think of everything. Like they think of the details, they explain the hairlines, they explain the need for lipo because John Travolta and Nicolas Cage do not have the same body type. Like the
They explain the
voices.
voices.
Yeah, they explain all of it. And that's how you know that they know perfectly well this isn't real, because they actually had to think through like what would it take to be able to do something like this? Like what details would you need to be mindful of? And but also just the way that so when I'm sure I did this before when I saw it, but when I was rewatching it recently, I kept forgetting that they didn't actually switch places. Like they did such a good job of playing each other that I kept forgetting it wasn't real.
Well, yeah, and again, I do think that this film, amazingly enough, for all of its batshitness, showcases exactly that. These are two very good actors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
both of them, and this is John Travolta and Nicolas Cage kind of at the peaks of their career.
Yeah,
right?
their 90s, like
yeah. Cage
High,
had won the Oscar like 2 years before or something like that. Like, they're both like, it is a reminder that as crazy as they can be on screen, they are actually both good actors, and you absolutely believe it. And like I think the part of it is that they're both dialed up to 11 from the start. Right, that, and they're playing these very extreme characters, as one would expect, and they know each other really, really well. So when they flip places, you absolutely believe like that they can go that far, right? But even like, you know, Nicolas Cage's performance, him trying to be Castor but also not being that crazy, right? Being Travolta and being this character that is not that crazy, that isn't a psychopathic killer, right? And having to balance those two out and basically going insane as a result of it, is so believable. And I was just like, yes, that is John Travolta with Nicolas Cage's face on. Like I will buy that.
Well, especially too when it keeps going and he learns that Castor has woken up and now looks like him, and he's trying to like protect his family, but he's wearing the face of the person who murdered their son, and his wife is never going to listen to this ever. And so it's like it creates this very like this added layer of danger and drama of like, how is he going to communicate that he really is who he says he is, and protect his wife and daughter from the like this murderer who's also trying to murder an entire city, because he's trying to blow up a bomb in Los Angeles as well.
He's trying to blow up a bomb in Los Angeles, and then he's like, well, maybe I won't blow up a bomb in Los Angeles. Maybe I'll like just really enjoy the fact that I'm now this hyper well-known heroic FBI agent. I could just fuck things up from the inside.
Yeah.
At a serious level, it does actually explore how close these men are to each other, right? And how just that little shift of being the hero, being the villain can change the trajectory of things.
Yeah.
And the cop is not always the good guy, and the villain is not always the bad guy, even though they are at the same time. But like I even like, so you know, Cage's performance when he becomes John Travolta is very realistic, but I like the other side of it too. I like the fact that Travolta like totally indulges in the Nicolas Cage of it all, and really like enjoys that. But then he also is like, you know what, that asshole is like trying to rape my not really daughter. I'm totally gonna beat the shit out of that dude. Like, you don't, that's not okay,
right?
let me teach you how to stab someone in the thigh, you know.
Yeah, here's a knife that you're going to use, definitely not against me eventually.
But there's just like those little moments of like, this, fuck that shit, like I don't like that.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like there's this very weird dynamic where you actually get a little bit of like humanity even in the worst person too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's such an interesting juxtaposition there. So yeah.
And I do like the I almost died when like Nicolas Cage gets high and begins talking about like what is he gonna do to this FBI agent that has fucked up his life, and he's like, I want to take his face off. And he says it
off.
he says it 15 times. He's like, I want his face off. Like, Leonardo DiCaprio pointing gift.
Yep.
It's such an insane film, but it is honestly like loads of fun. And yeah, I was willing to accept, once I was willing to accept the fact that this was like actually possible, which it's not. I was willing to accept everything else. Like within
the rules of this movie.
Yeah.
This is very much a film that relies very heavily on the willing suspension of disbelief.
Throughout the entire film.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing I did notice, like there's so many fights and gun battles and everything, and it takes forever for them because they say like, oh, a violent sneeze can dislodge this microchip that changes your voice. And it's like they have been like falling off of buildings for the past 2 hours. How have those microchips not become dislodged yet?
All right. Yeah. Any other thoughts about Face Off?
I mean, I know why it bothered me. So the scene that stuck in my mind is the scene is the sequence really where Cage wakes up and someone has taken his face off. And
he should have won an Oscar for that.
And then he like loses his mind because one would. And then you get like, it's actually very good in terms of the gore, where it's not showing tons of grossness, but it's just disturbing enough to really stick in your mind.
Yeah.
And that stuck in my mind from the time I was over 12 years old. That was the entire film for me.
I think you had a question for your parents about that, didn't you?
Yes, why? Why did they think this was appropriate for me to see at that stage in my life? Like, why?
In some ways, you were raised like a Gen X kid.
In some ways, but I mean, my parents were usually very careful about violence and not showing me really violent films. I think that there were definitely times where, there is, with action movies, there's the action movie violence that is like, explosions, etc., that is so not real that it doesn't feel realistic, right? That it's like, okay, that's fine, whatever. The horror stuff, that's what I'm saying, that particular scene was the scene that stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
Because that is like body horror at that point. It's such a disturbing concept, I think, that someone could remove your face.
Yeah.
That's like there's something just really gross and distressing about that. And so that's what really stuck with me. So I believe I did accuse them of this the other day, and my dad was like, that was your mom's fault. She definitely showed it to you. I don't remember seeing that at all. And I was like, no, absolutely not. It's just like, I remember seeing it, so someone showed it to me.
Oh man, that's great. I love it.
But yeah, it's okay. And that's why I am the way I am today.
It explains so much.
But what about you? Like, what, you've seen this film multiple times.
Yeah, I it's one of those movies that I had watched it a lot and I never really thought deeply about any of it. It was just very entertaining. And this is gonna sound so stupid, but when I was watching the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent and listening to Pedro Pascal talk about it, I was like, this movie deserves a little bit of deeper thought. And so when I was watching it this time, that was when I was really thinking about like what this would mean for someone who had, like, he was holding his son in his arms when he got shot, like he was the target, and I was just thinking about it on that level. And it's like, yes, this movie is crazy. It's ridiculous. It's a little bit dumb. The action is just insane. But just like just like with a lot of other John Woo films, amid all of that, there is this deeper level that is actually really beautiful and heartfelt and dramatic and a little deeper than you get just by watching it on a surface level. So
Yeah.
I think that he manages to use some of the most insane ideas to communicate something that's actually really ultimately, in a weird way, a story about moving on from a tragedy.
Well, yeah, it's true. And there's also this, like, it's kind of turning things inside out a little bit in the sense that so often a lot of films we have those things that are like just under the surface. That it's making the subtextual textual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are a number of, I think, 90s films that do this, and that's why we kind of remember them, really. But like, so that subtext of grief, that subtext of like understanding your most hated enemy, right?
Yeah.
And kind of quite literally walking a mile in his shoes, right? Experiencing life as him. And particularly for the Travolta character, like there's actually a really good scene where with Gina Gershon and her child, right? And he's threatened her in the past and all this, and suddenly he's like seeing these people as, these are human beings that I've threatened. These are human beings that I've thought were pawns to be used, were things to be manipulated, and in some ways I was behaving in exactly the same way as Castro Troy.
Yeah.
And he comes into more of the sense of his humanity, I think, by the end of the film, amazingly enough. Again, like you say, is within the context of this batshit idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's talk Mission Impossible 2 from 2000. Is it 2000? Yeah.
2000. Yeah.
2000.
Millennium.
Yeah. And so this movie is in order to bring Nazis to justice, a government agent played by Cary Grant. Oh, wait, no, wrong movie. This does borrow heavily from the plot of Notorious. I'm being very generous when I say borrow heavily. This movie is basically a remake. Yeah, this movie is basically a remake of Notorious, which could totally have qualified for our conversation last week about good Alfred Hitchcock remakes.
I think we actually did, in discussing Alfred Hitchcock remakes, I think we were actually like, we could talk about Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah.
Good.
I say good in the sense of like the Burbs and Throw Mama from the Train, where it's like,
okay,
it's not like it's a great movie, but it's entertaining, it's wild, and a lot of fun. And I think it uses a story that Alfred Hitchcock popularized in a way that works really well for a totally different set of characters. That's what I mean by that.
I will accept that.
Thank you. So Mission Impossible 2 is wildly different from the first Mission Impossible. It's a couple of years, it's about 4 years after the first movie came out, and so it has a totally different look, a different feel. Tom Cruise has long hair, and this movie was directed by John Woo, and it feels very much like a John Woo film in so many ways. It's in this case, there is a virus that could wipe out all of humanity. We have no idea what that would be like to live in a world like that. Anyway, so Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise's character, has to recruit someone to go undercover, basically to infiltrate the bad guys like lair and stop this from happening. The person that he recruits is played by Thandie Newton, and she happens to be the ex-girlfriend of the bad guy played by DeGray Scott. And it very much is the plot of Notorious. Like, they're not even trying to hide it. If you know Notorious, which is a very well-known Alfred Hitchcock film, like it's not a secret, it's not accidental, it's very much Notorious.
You mean that like a speech that Louis Calhern gives in Notorious is also a speech that Anthony Hopkins gives in
Like almost
Mission
word for word,
Impossible
yeah.
2,
Mhm.
which was how I was clued into this was Notorious, because I'd seen Mission Impossible 2 before I'd seen Notorious. And then I watched Notorious, and then at some point I saw Mission Impossible 2 again, and I was like, I feel like I recognize this speech. I feel like I've heard this before, because I love Notorious. I'd watched it numerous times at that point. And then I was like, this is the same movie. And I began going, it's like, it's the same plot. It's the same fucking plot, but with explosions.
Yeah. And basically from the beginning, like, I mean, not the very first scene, but early on when the two of them meet. So in Notorious, it's Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman. And obviously in Mission Impossible 2, it's Tom Cruise and Tandy Newton. But like they meet because she's doing something wrong and he gets her out of trouble, and that's how they like get connected, and that's why he's able to go and recruit her for what he needs. So that's exactly the same like meeting scenario, and then things happen, things progress. But you had mentioned, and I've also felt this way for a long time too, you had mentioned that Mission Impossible 2 was one of your favorite Mission Impossibles for a really long time. Can you talk about why?
I think that again, a lot of it comes down to the action. It is fantastic action. Like it is a great action film. I do think that if you're gonna remake a Hitchcock film or like lift whole sections of a Hitchcock film, you should probably do it in like the craziest way possible. And I do think that this film accomplishes that. You know, the one of my favorite sequences is like the motorcycle joust into the beach fight.
Yes.
At the end of the film. It is a great fight scene. Like it's a good chase, it's a great fight. It's like again, it's that craziness that you've come to expect from John Woo films. That at the same time really plays out the conflict that is developed between these two characters right from the very beginning. So again, it's that balance of this is crazy, but it's also this is how these two characters would react to the situation. This is the end game for how they're going to resolve their problems. So yeah, and it's a fantastic fight. So I do enjoy the crap out of this movie. Even though I also recognize that it is a total ripoff of one of my favorite Hitchcock films. But it does rip off very, very well. I also, one of the reasons why I rewatched Mission Impossible 2 so much is because I had a thing for Richard Roxburgh, who plays the sort of the henchman, the right-hand man of Dougray Scott, and takes the role of Claude Rains' mother from Notorious, which I think is just really funny. Like, and he's a good villain. Like, Richard Roxburgh has had an interesting career, but he's a fantastic, like, just purely nasty henchman.
Yeah, he's so good too in this one. Like, he doesn't say a ton. Like, so much of his character is menacing and like quiet. Like he just like he could tear someone down just with a glare, you know, and he's so good at it. It's perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
He's actually more similar to Martin Landau in North by Northwest. If you use Hitchcock comparisons, he's very similar in that way, where he's almost more dangerous in some ways than the main villain.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's so true. Yeah, I don't even know what to say about Mission Impossible 2. I feel like everybody has seen it probably more than once. But I guess let's talk about it as a John Woo film, because the Mission Impossible movies really didn't, I mean, we kind of talked about this a few weeks ago, but they really didn't start to coalesce into a franchise until like the 4th or 5th movie. Before that, every one of them, like especially the first 3, they're so different from each other. And I think they really take on the qualities of their directors. And I think none more so than Mission Impossible 2, which very much like it's all the things that John Woo is best known for. It's crazy action, really, really well choreographed action that is part of the plot of the movie. And then like we get we get an appearance of the doves. We get all those trademark John Woo qualities. So what would you say about kind of some of the hallmarks of John Woo in this movie, and whether they do or do not work?
Well, again, you go back to that extremity, which is what we've been talking about for most of this conversation, about the extreme level. So I think that this is actually a really good marriage between star and director in a lot of ways, because Woo's brand of action matches some of the shit that Tom Cruise wants to do so well. So like the motorcycle joust, the crazy car chases, the big explosions, the slow-mo diving through the air in slow motion with your shooting your guns, all of that kind of like almost boyish. This is the kind of this is the sort of thing that boys do when you pretend to be firing guns and stuff like that. It's like, oh, I'm gonna dive behind this thing, like, and then I'm gonna spin the motorcycle and do a backflip, like all of those sorts of things that are so funny and not realistic in a certain sense is very much the kind of thing that like Cruise wants to do and that Woo's very good at. So it kind of coalesces at that level. So I do think, I agree that it didn't really become a franchise until quite later, but this is more like all of the subsequent Mission Impossible films.
Yeah, this laid the groundwork for. Sorry.
No, go on.
Well, I was gonna say, this laid the groundwork for Mission Impossible as an action franchise more than a spy franchise.
Yeah, and I think that seems to very much balance out with what Cruise wanted as the actor, as the stuntman, etc. And also, and Woo is good at doing that. Like he's good at crafting these believable within the world of the film action sequences that are at the same time completely unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh shoot, what was I gonna say? Or something else I was about to add to that. Give me a second, it'll come to me. I don't know, it's lost. Hopefully it'll come back. But I think one of the things about Mission Impossible 2, well, so first of all, like, yes, the motorcycle jousting scene is amazing. But so like just as in the first Mission Impossible, where so much of the marketing was built around the train sequence and the CIA break-in drop from the ceiling sequence, this movie was built around some of those big stunts as well, like as far as the marketing goes, and that big, not just the motorcycle chasing and all that, but especially that jump where they slam chests, and oh my gosh, how did they not break their ribs? Oh man. But even before that, in the very opening scene, it opens with Ethan. Well, I guess it's the second scene. But when we first see Ethan again, it's him hanging off the side of a cliff, seemingly without any sort of what's the word?
Belay. No ropes. He's free climbing.
Right. Free climbing in Monument Valley, because, of course, why wouldn't he? and that was a big part of the marketing too. And it's like, this was our first chance to see that every one of these movies was going to subsequently get bigger and bigger with the stunts and the action and stuff. And you really see that because everything is ramped up from the first movie. And I even like how when they have to break into this lab to get this virus and kill it before it can leak out to the world, and they're trying to figure out, all the complications, like with Ving Rhames' character and the rest of the team, and they're trying to figure out like how to accomplish this with all of the challenges that they have that are similar to the challenges that they had with the CIA break-in, but not quite the same. And so he can't do things the same way that he did the first time. And they even like call attention to that and basically tell you like, nope, this has to go a little farther. We have to push it a little bit more. And so it really does ramp everything up a little bit. And I feel like John Woo was the exact right director to do that, to like to push it forward. And like you said, I think it was such a perfect marriage between director and star, because it really felt like Tom Cruise knew exactly what, and I'm sure he did, like knew exactly what he was doing by going after John Woo to direct a Mission Impossible movie and really turn it into something bigger and something more ultimately.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's very funny that that rock climbing sequence, because I remember when the film came out and like that was a big thing. Like people talked about it a lot. I remember seeing Tom Cruise interviewed talking about it, like all of that. I love the fact that it has fuck all to do with the rest of the film. It is literally just Ethan like having fun. Like he's not on a mission in his free time. He's not on a mission. He's not like he's just doing this because of course I'm doing this. This is what I do. And it's a lot. It's a lot of fun. I do want to mention, I think that we should talk briefly at least about the women and the representations of women, and particularly when it comes to, it's hard for me not to attach this to Notorious, because in Notorious, Ingrid Bergman does a lot of stuff. Like she is very instrumental in solving the case, in like, you know, dealing with having to be in this relationship marriage with this man that she's not actually in love with, that is potentially a killer, like all of these things, the amount of danger that she gets put in, etc. And even to the point where they like have to drug her multiple times to stop her from getting away, right? And so she's ultimately saved, right, by Cary Grant, but she's very, very proactive in the Hitchcock film. Not so much in Mission Impossible 2. Like she is very much like, okay, so she's supposed to be this master thief, right? But she never really gets to exercise that much at all. And then it's basically like, she's been infected with this virus and we're going to like push her off a cliff or whatever. We're going to release her into the middle of humanity. And so it really downplays her role in getting to do anything. Like she doesn't really get that much to do, even though she's been established as this character that should be very proactive in a lot of ways. Yeah. Like the only time that she really gets to use her skills is when she's trying to get that envelope from Ambrose's pocket at the race and everything. But even then, like she's not sneaky enough to get it past him. Like he still knows that she did that. And so like she never really gets to realize her potential. You're absolutely right. And I think in a lot of John Woo's films, women aren't necessarily well represented overall. This isn't confined just to Mission Impossible 2. I think this is a frequent issue with his movies. He definitely is making movies about and for boys. Yes, definitely. And I at the same time, I don't think that there's not tons of just misogyny or anything like that. Right. It's just women aren't very important. They become the damsels in distress. Yeah, it's not like let's torture women, let's hurt women, etc. But it's very much like, so the Joan Allen characters, John Travolta's wife in Face Off, the teenage daughter who like has a couple of scenes. The most active woman in Face Off is Gina Gershon, and even she is like very much the damsel in distress. She has ulterior reasons for protecting Castor and things like that. And even in Hard Boiled, like you've got Tequila's love interest is another cop, and when she gets to the hospital, she's distracted by the babies first before she gets into the action, and then it becomes like, I have to save the babies. Yeah, exactly. So it's this very casual, like you say, it's sort of boys only adventure almost. It's this very casual sexism that kind of doesn't demean women really, but also kind of just puts them off to the side and goes like, okay, you're plot devices basically. Yeah, it doesn't feel mean-spirited. It doesn't feel like it's attacking women. It's just not letting them really be a big important part of the action. They don't get to participate in the action in the same way that the men do. Exactly. I think it's clearest in a lot of ways in Mission Impossible 2 because of the existence of Notorious and because of the very close relationship between the two films. So you can see where, again, I'm always like, oh, Hitchcock is such a misogynist. It's just like, could be, but also can we talk about how proactive his women are? Because it's in the remakes where the women stop being proactive, it seems. Just pointing that out.
He's also making a lot of movies that were written with or at least or by women and co-produced, and like he involves women in his storytelling, which is why his women are tend to be so much better written and more active.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it's clearer in something like Mission Impossible 2, where you're like, especially because she's been established as supposed to be this great thief, and then nothing ever really develops more out of that. You're just like, it doesn't pay off in the way that you kind of expect it to. It focuses more than on the conflict between particularly these two men.
Yeah. Well, even in the beginning, when we first meet her, she's in the middle of a robbery, essentially, and that he gets her out of. But she, she's snarky, she has a lot of barbs, like she has the comebacks and things. She's not just a good thief, she's also just kind of a strong personality. And as soon as she's in this situation with her ex, she becomes kind of this wilting flower before she's ever infected with a virus.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But the thing is, even with those issues, John Woo films are fun and you should watch them.
They are fun. Like it's I give him a pass sometimes. I have to admit, where I'm just like, there's some things that I do not appreciate about the undercurrents here, but also this is really entertaining. And look, they just blew up that building and now they're going to fight on motorcycles. Isn't that cool?
Like, how can you hate that? And again, I think he gets the pass partly just because of the fact that it doesn't feel mean-spirited. It doesn't feel like he hates women. It's just he's not really considering them in the narrative. So
he doesn't hate women. He just doesn't really think about them as people.
But also, Nicolas Cage has golden guns, and I love it.
He does. He dances around to he's like, pre-specimen, he dances around, and I swear to God, they set that up solely so that John Travolta could dance around.
Yes, like
when he's disarming the bomb. I really do. It's just like, we have to do this, and I think the two of them probably got together and were like, we have to do this. We're like, okay, 100%.
Absolutely. Yep. Let's see. So Hard Boiled is a little bit tricky to find online. You can rent it, I think, from Amazon. Not saying that's what I did.
And it's not the sort of thing that you would necessarily want to search for on YouTube.
I would never watch. Do that.
We are not recommending that at all.
No, we definitely would not recommend looking that up on YouTube at all. Because I'm sure there's no good high quality prints of it on there. Anyway, you can find Face Off on Peacock. No, sorry, not Peacock, Paramount Plus, and I think on AMC as well.
AMC
and
Plus,
then and then Mission Impossible 2 is on Paramount Plus as well. So, and also at my house. You can just come on over. I'll show it to you. So, anyway, any final thoughts before we wrap up, Lauren?
No, check out these films, especially like I'm saying, if you've not seen Face Off in a while, like it was a joy for me. Like I had a great time.
So much fun.
So great.
So much fun.
Very much a Saturday night movie. Like
yeah. And watch some of his other movies too. Hard Target is such a fun one to watch as well. And Last Hurrah for Chivalry is on the Criterion Channel, and that's a very early John Woo film that, even though it's a very different type of movie, it shares so much of the same DNA of the things that he's best known for. So yeah, totally worth it. All right. Well, that's going to wrap things up. Thank you all so much for listening. We especially want to thank our patrons who help keep the show going. Your support really does mean the world to us. Our patrons are Ali, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Heather, James, Judy, Karen, Carriata, Lauren, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, and Tao. And if you would like to become a patron yourself, you can go to patreon.com/citizendame and sign up. We do have bonus episodes and you get early access to the episodes. We also have little welcome packs. So if you sign up, you get one of those. And if you have not received one, please be sure to let us know. We do have our Zazzle store, zazzle.com/citizendamepod, and our Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame. And those are just a couple ways you can support us. It just really does help pay for our hosting and keep feminist film conversations on the internet. So you can also find our work on our website, citizendamepod.com, where we have reviews and some other fun stuff and more things coming soon. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us, citizendamepod@gmail.com. And we are on all kinds of social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and now Blue Sky, Citizen Dame Pod. Blue Sky, you have to do the Citizen Dame Pod at bsky.social. And then also Letterboxd. We're really trying to do more with our Letterboxd. So if you're on there, please follow us at Citizen Dame. But you can also find us individually. Lauren, where are you?
I'm on the various socials at LH Business.
And I'm on all the socials at Karen M. Peterson. So that's it. That's going to wrap things up for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Watch more movies.
Bye.
Bye.
Once we kidnap Super Cop, then what?
Tiny surgery. I'd like to take his face off. If you excuse me, I have to use the little boy's wee-wee room.
Cat. You want to take his face?
Yes. His face. Oh. The eyes, nose, skin. It's coming off. The face.
No more drugs for that man.